I put the website up there. If you can scroll down just a little so you can see the yellow part on the left side of the blue margin. Right there. Perfect. I just want to give you guys a small glimpse of where Oklahoma is headed, because I actually just moved from the only nation's pilot P20 STEM pathway school in the country. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to even come and personally speak. I'm very eager to share with you, every single one of you, my personal experience and the direct impact that the P20 STEM pathway had on my children and my family. Let me go back. I remember back in 6th grade, I took a school field trip to the Capitol building. Are schools even allowed to do that anymore? Anyways, I specifically remember getting really dressed up because we knew in 6th grade that we were going to a very important place. We hopped on a bus and we toured the inside and out of the Capitol in Denver. I was in Denver. I especially recall thinking as a child, wow, this is a really scary place. I know all these people who work here in this Capitol are really important. I even knew that back in 6th grade. But I knew that I never ever wanted to do that job. It was way too important. Well, now, 20 years later, here I am. Only this time I'm here in the Oklahoma City Capitol as a very concerned parent. I am here once again in this very important place in hopes to reach very important people and make very important decisions. I honestly do not want to be here today. In fact, I tried for years to avoid putting myself in these situations. I do not choose to fight Common Core or the education reform because I have absolutely nothing better to do with my free time. In fact, I did not choose this, it chose me. I watched my 2 kids along with 32 other children in my kids' class suffer. It absolutely tears your heart out, not just for my kids, but the entire class as a whole. I know for a fact that we did not have 33 failing children in one class, especially in kindergarten and 1st grade. And I certainly know that we do not have 65 failing teachers. What we do have, because I witnessed it firsthand, is a broken set of standards, also known as an outcome-based education. Unfortunately, it completely removes children from the outcome. We have turned schools into corporate entities at the expense of the students, and those students are the ones paying the consequences. My point is this. Now as an adult, I truly see just how important this Capitol building and all of the people in here really are. In fact, talk about changing lives. Talk about impacting an entire state, impacting an entire generation even. This truly is a very important place. Each person in this building is a life changer. Senators, governors, mayors, representatives, and every single one of their assistants walks in and out of this Capitol building day in and day out. They make vital decisions on a daily basis, decisions that affect each and every one of us here in this room. Decisions that affect our children, and more importantly, these decisions affect an entire generation and our future. So this education reform certainly is not something we should ever take lightly. We have an entire generation of children relying on these significant decisions. And let me tell you why my family, why I myself am unique and different. I do not look at this education reform, these so-called higher academic standards, on paper or in theory. You see, we actually lived through these higher academic standards at the Vista Peak campus. That's the website that I put up there on the projector. Vista Peak is the only, as it states on their website, preschool through post-secondary educational concept in our entire nation. The pilot school, Vista Peak, is a P20 campus which was recently built in Aurora, Colorado. That's where we just moved from. We were at the grand opening celebration, me and my family, yay, at the school, and it was back in August of 2010. We had no idea what we were in for. We were excited as a family for this new 21st century education for our children. 3 years later, due to that specific school and Common Core, we in turn uprooted our family exclusively to get away from these standards in hopes to give our children a more traditional approach to education, specifically reading, writing, and math. What a tremendous difference it made in our children. In fact, it was a major turning point for my son. He was 8 years old. Both of our children learned and achieved more in just 1 year here in Oklahoma as opposed to the 3 years that we barely spent surviving Common Core. They soared mainly because our traditional academic standards here in Oklahoma, where they were real, they were genuine, every standard was very clear and exact. My children understood what they were expected to do. The major difference we saw was that teachers here in Oklahoma, Owasso specifically, were actually teaching. They stopped, they took the time, and they valued every single student as an individual. We noticed here as parents that there was not any major pressure of teachers having to race through material in order to meet a standard or just teach to the test. So who says that our current standards in Oklahoma are not already good or great for that matter? How many parents are lined up outside every administrator's building demanding a major overhaul of these state standards? The only ones I see right now raising a voice are the ones that have actually been awakened to what Common Core really is and how rigor impacts children. I actually went and looked up the definition of rigor in the good old-fashioned Webster Dictionary. Let me read it to you. Rigor, the difficult and unpleasant condition or experience that is associated with something. The quality or state of being exact, careful, or strict. Harsh inflexibility in opinion, temper, or judgment. The quality of being unyielding or inflexible. An act or instance of strictness, severity, or cruelty. A condition that makes life very difficult, challenging, or uncomfortable. I also went and looked up the definition of the words moral and value. Let me also read these two definitions to you. Moral, of relating to principles of right and wrong in behavior, expressing or teaching a conception of right behavior, conforming to a standard of right behavior, sanctioned by or operative in one's conscience or ethical judgment. Value. Value is the amount of money that something is worth, the price or cost of something. Something that can be bought for a low or fair price. Usefulness or importance. A fair return or equivalent in goods, services, or money for something exchanged. Relative, worthy, utility of importance. Something as a principle or quality which is intrinsically valuable or desirable. Now, moral and value are quite contrary to the word rigor. Now, allow me to also tell you what attracted us to the state of Oklahoma in the first place. Moral values, principles, character. The people here are genuine, and it showed. We moved here to Oklahoma only 1 year ago, and we as parents are so grateful for what Oklahoma was and is teaching our children. Immediately, we were drawn in by the fact that people here still had moral values. We were amazed. It was evident compared to where we were living. We were impressed that the cities here were even still allowed to post signs and encourage communities to instill moral character. Those same relative values, not the strict, severe, or harsh, unyielding precision such as standards. Essentially, we toured every single district in the Tulsa area. We went to every single school. We asked all the tough questions because we knew what we did not want for our children. Each leader, hold on 1 second. It was incredible. I remember each leader was so proud to share their district beliefs on not just the values, but the fundamentals and good moral character that they were instilling in the youth. In fact, every school site, every single one that we had went to, had its own school success creed of some sort. We were blown away. We were excited to see that these things were still being taught in school, as those have been far removed in Colorado and even a few other states where we have resided. In fact, we could not believe students were still even allowed to profess the Pledge of Allegiance when we moved here. Instantly, we were reassured that basically any district here in Oklahoma would produce a very well-rounded education that would prepare students for success and mold them to be responsible citizens and future leaders. We were seeking that distinctively for our two children, learning and teaching moral value. 2 weeks ago, I make a lot of copies in my teachers' classes. I'm a very involved parent. And 2 weeks ago, I noticed tons of Common Core materials coming back home again. I about had a panic attack. I could not believe that this was coming to Oklahoma. I asked a few teachers who were reluctant to talk, mainly in fear of their jobs, but the consensus was that they felt Common Core was not practical and they knew the testing was excessive. I then asked some of the fellow parents, and not a single parent I approached out of about 50 had even heard the words Common Core. This is exactly what happened to us back in Colorado 3 years ago. Nobody knew about this slow progression of Common Core. We didn't even know. We had never heard of it. It somehow just sneaks itself right in, quietly, secretly almost. If these standards are so great, then why are we having to secretly implement them? Now that I began seeing Common Core here in these exceptional Oklahoma schools, I as a parent demanded answers. I was going to protect my children, and I had to find out what my options were. I immediately contacted our curriculum director and our school superintendent to ask them what they knew and what the district plan was. I had a heart-to-heart with both of them, and I told them our past hands-on experience with Common Core. In fact, I divulged all the detrimental aspects of what Common Core did to my children in Colorado. I was in tears. Their response to me was this: this is a nationally mandated standard. Unfortunately, we don't have much control or choice. This is just a law. We have to abide. Quite frankly, I was extremely angry and I was disappointed in their lack of concern. My parents always told me that if all my friends were jumping off a bridge, that I was to be a leader and not follow. I have been raised to stand up for my values, even if I stand alone. My purpose is that each of you here will become enlightened and will go home and continue to do more research on Common Core. I hope you will step into the trenches of the actual schools where these teachers, principals, and superintendents are the ones expected to dole out these standards, and you will see the ramifications of what is happening firsthand. How many teachers have currently been surveyed on what is going on right now? Then you can take our past experience, which I'm getting ready to tell you about, combine it with your dedicated research, and then you individually can decide for yourself if these standards is truly what is best for the future generation and all of our children. I have printed off the standards from the OK.gov website. K through 5, I have them right here. This is just math and ELA, English Language Arts. Now, due to major time constraints, I obviously can't highlight. I can't go through all these, but I can highlight a few, and I figured I would just start at the very basic level of kindergarten math. Please note this is the new math, also fuzzy math. It is known as front-end estimation or integrated math. By the way, this new math is subjective math. It is not objective, which means it takes strictly an abstract approach to reasoning. It gets rid of absolute truth. Let me turn to the kindergarten overview on page 10, and I'm going to read to each of you the kindergarten standard of mathematical practice for our 5-year-olds. Mathematical practice. Number 1, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. 2, reason abstractly and quantitatively. 3, construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. Use appropriate tools strategically. Look for and express regularity in repeated reasoning.
Don't gag-stroke that idea.
Now, I don't know you, or I don't know about you, but I don't even understand how this can be expected of 5-year-olds when I, as an adult, have a very difficult time grasping these abstract concepts. And why would we ever want 5-year-olds to be critiquing 5-year-olds? Let me tell you what did happen to my 5-year-old, whom, by the way, is extremely good at math and numbers. He began to hate school. He hated it, absolutely. He hated math, and he became very discouraged. Essentially, he started having anxiety issues. He refused to get out of the car. I kid you not, he would lock himself in my van and tell me, "Mommy, I will not go to school today." He would complain often about headaches, stomach aches. Quite frankly, he felt like a failure, and so did we, because he could not grasp these concepts, and it did not take very long for him to completely shut down. Children this age are not mentally capable, nor are their brains physically developed enough to understand abstract, subjective reasoning, which is why typically algebra has never been introduced until the later years, closer to 8th grade. Now teachers are expected to start this exact same process in kindergarten. Yet these children have not even learned their basic math facts, and they have no confidence or fundamental math concept with plain numbers. Talk about getting the cart before the horse. We cried and struggled daily. It was horrible. 3 long, devastating years of frustration. Now, let me move on to the writing standards, which writing becomes the main emphasis in Common Core, as most of you know. The writing part of Common Core was actually the most difficult standard for my kindergartner. The main reason is because kindergartners typically are not independent learners. They need lots of guidance from their teachers. How many 5-year-olds do you know that can actually write in complete sentences with punctuation and all? Most important, it is extremely difficult for them to be able to write if they cannot read fluently. And due to the cost of implementing Common Core in Colorado, these kindergarten classes had high class sizes. At one point, my kid had 40 kids in his class with no assistance. So I volunteered immensely in the classroom. In fact, I subsidized up to 35 hours a week. I became a permanent proctor, testing all year because they didn't have time to test. I personally saw these expectations and the entire class's difficulty firsthand. My son had not even mastered all of the letter sounds, his sight words, even writing his full name, let alone a complete thought and sentence with immense details. They had no time for phonics and phonemic awareness. So in turn, we had to hire a private in-home tutor to provide the phonics that were missing, as whole language became the main approach. My son was very analytical. He wanted to know why the CH says ch. And because I went to school for business, and I had no understanding for being a teacher, I could not explain it. After several parent-teacher-principal meetings, we had no other option but to supplement it at home. Now let me read to you the research to build and present knowledge standard for kindergarten writing. Write arguments to support claims and an analysis of substantive topic or text using valid reasoning and relevant and sufficient evidence. Number 2, write informative, explanatory text to examine and convey the complex ideas and information clearly and accurately through the effective selection, organization, and analysis of the content. Write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events using effective technique, well-chosen details with well-structured event sequence. In regards to these specific writing standards, again, the main focus is to encourage the students to write these lengthy, detailed stories. Yet many of them still remember cannot read independently. They have not even been taught how to spell or break down a word with phonics. My son was expected to write personal narrative after personal narrative and even sometimes progressive poetry. He was expected to link the events in order as they occurred. Truthfully, 5-year-olds are not developmentally able to think literally in regards to time or even put things in a specific order as they occur. This is exactly why they get today, yesterday, even 5 minutes ago all mixed up. I can tell you firsthand that not a single student in my child's class could actually comprehend what the teacher was expecting of them. Oftentimes I would stand in the class and it would just go over my head. This once again created major anxiety and stress on not just our son but the entire class. My son began to refuse to even get out of bed in the morning, simply from the sheer terror of thinking he was going to have to go write more papers with more details and things that he could not comprehend. Talk about banging your head on a wall. I compare it to teaching a 2-month-old how to walk. They just are not developmentally capable, and kids this age have not been alive long enough, nor have they enough life experience to relate to these so-called writing standards. It creates a lot of undue stress and apprehension, not only on the students, but also the teachers. Now let me move on to the reading standards back on page 10. These are called the anchor standards for reading.
Okay, we're going to have about 3 or 4 minutes to wrap it up. We're going to have to move on.
Okay.
I appreciate this.
I thought I had 30 minutes.
I appreciate this,
Okay.
but go ahead.
The reading part. Read closely to determine what the text says explicitly and make logical inference from it. Interpret word and phrase as they are used in a text, including determining technical, connotative, and figurative meanings. I think you guys get the point. These standards, they don't understand. Now, it's bad enough when a child starts out distraught over school, and we as parents knew with our first child that something was not right, but we could not pinpoint it. However, when our daughter, the natural learner, began falling into the same pattern, she started hating school. It was then that it became obvious. The 2020 hindsight vision was even brighter once we enrolled them here in Oklahoma. I'm going to skip that part. As most of you know, the education industry has been making changes for decades. By this point, most educators are numb and assume years from now we will be rediscussing yet another reform to our education system. That may be true, although prior to now there has not been a big key player like Bill Gates. Bill Gates has created the software program designed to evaluate and streamline this process along with the state longitudinal databases. Technology is a game changer, folks. You see, in the past, no matter what education reform took place, the school district had the ability to filter a lot of the information. Unfortunately now, as textbooks become a thing of the past, we cannot filter the content. Do you see what happens? Technology makes it very difficult as things become a thing of the past. 3 years ago, Common Core snuck in our family. We had no idea at the time. I am here today to bring awareness and prevent this from happening again. If we do not fight for our kids, then who will? I am not waiting around to see the bottom drop out and regret ever speaking up about everything I've already known and lived through. I keep hearing this famous phrase, college and career ready. Well, however, after 3.5 years, I'm still waiting for someone who can define what college and career ready or deeper, more critical thinking actually means. Honestly, is it even possible for our brains to uncritically think? Bottom line, Common Core in a short amount of time has already proved to fail. Just check out New York, California, Colorado, Kentucky, or Georgia test scores. Common Core is the first time in the history of this country that a privately written and copyrighted plan has become public policy. Quite frankly, my child is not a robot that I send to school to be programmed to pass tests. Our children and our teachers are way more valuable than any given test. If my child, or any child for that matter, is not engaged, then they lose interest. Whatever happened to curiosity, adventure, and resilience? We cannot be idle and sit back accepting mindlessly somebody else's opinion for truth. Should we be training and programming our students to just pass tests, or should we be inspiring them? Are you telling me that if my child does not go off to college to receive a college degree that he or she is not successful? Is the hardworking farmer that farms 400 acres, the fireman, the business owner, or even the military helicopter pilot down the street not successful? And did you know there is a very long list of famous successful people that never graduated college and or high school for that matter, including Mary Kay, Michael Dell, Walt Disney, Henry Ford, Milton Hershey, Rachel Ray, Oprah, Ted Turner, Steve Jobs, Frank Lloyd Wright, even Bill Gates just received his honorary college diploma in 2007 strictly on the basis of his contribution to the world of business, not his college coursework. It takes so much more than an opinion-based standard of college and career ready to convince me as a mother. I do not buy it, and I refuse to sit back and just watch every child's joy for learning be stripped away. I also refuse to watch these amazing teachers' satisfaction and joy for teaching be extinguished. We are all created to do so much more. Why would anybody in Oklahoma be willing to accept any amount of money in exchange for a child's brain? I am sad for the kids in our community who will never know the beauty of a good, inspirational classic literature novel because it's going to be more important to read an informational text like an EPA guideline or a standard. I am also sad for the kids who will always think that understanding a mathematical process is far more important than getting an accurate answer. I sure would not want to ride in the car that those kids are going to engineer. And I especially do not want them monitoring my medication dosage when I'm in my retirement home. Now, if these standards and expectations start in kindergarten, then we know at the bottom level The staircase is only going to rise and climb from there. As a parent, I attempt to rationalize why the national standards expect my 5-year-old to be thoroughly engaging, clear, precise, informative, and instructive in all aspects, and yet nearly every element of their grading and their assessment and their evaluations have nothing but ambiguous, rhetorical, and vague information. I am all about setting standards, but we need concrete, realistic standards that are attainable as well as measurable. By rigorous, what they mean is excessive in workload. So once Common Core really gets rolling here in Oklahoma, I know what to expect again. Tons of extra homework daily. Trust me when I say that the teachers cannot get through all of their benchmarks or modules in class. And because the teachers cannot get through all of this information in class, it comes home because their jobs and their evaluations depend on it. These standards truly become an introduction because there's no time to make sure children are grasping all of the concepts, which means little to no retention. I suggest you survey these teachers and ask them how overwhelming it is. Benchmark after benchmark, moving through things at a rapid pace, teachers have no choice but to go through the motions. There's no time to teach anymore, you see. We have rigorous standards to achieve. Our children, they lose their individuality, and the teachers lose their flexibility. It's called the race to nowhere. Essentially what happens is the good teachers and leaders that really want to teach our children either retire or quit. They evidently see these standards coming down the pipeline. It's already begun, the same mass exodus of exceptional leaders who know and see the consequences firsthand. In Owasso alone, we just had 5 principals retire and 12 new teachers at our school alone. This is like deja vu for me. I see the train wreck up ahead. This is the exact same turmoil that we abandoned in Colorado in order to pursue a more gratifying education here in Oklahoma. In conclusion, curiosity, creative expression, motivation, concentration, interest, and enjoyment are the keys for the development of learners in order to gain knowledge and academic ability. That is why there is truly a huge distinction between intelligence and wisdom. If you want children to develop high-level reading skills, the best way is to encourage a love and passion for learning, instead of dissecting everything they read with a complex high-order analysis. That scrutiny alone destroys the very thing you are trying to create, a love of reading. It creates the exact opposite effect and in response makes them less likely to spend time with books. Both of my children hated school, and it took a mere 3 months, 90 days, for them to show the signs and proof of total calamity. Here we are approximately 90 days into the implementation in our school district, and the havoc wreaked on our school alone is already observable. This time, I am not going to allow the wool to be pulled over my eyes. Any standard that includes analyze, determine, compare, critique, opinion, judgment, I can go on and on, are understandings and brain functions that are not physically developed until high school at the earliest. Exactly why child psychologists and developmental experts actually refer to these standards as a form of child abuse, because the students are not physically capable of meeting these standards. Almost any idea or standard can actually sound convincing and look persuasive and credible on paper. Frankly, 3 years ago, we were absolutely certain that Vista Peak, the P20 school, was an exact fit for our 2 children. We as parents wanted them to have that 21st century experience in education, but the practicality failed, and it failed miserably. My 2 children, along with the other 100 in their grade levels, were affirmation enough. They have already been that Common Core experiment. Please do not take Oklahoma schools for granted. Oklahoma has it right. Our current standards are already well established. They are suitably demonstrated. This state is striving to be exceptional, not average. These traditional academic standards here are already way too exceptional to accept anything less. And just for the record, I was a terrible test taker. I know, and you know, that the significance of life itself is invaluable, priceless, incalculable, far more than a mere test score or a statistic.